Start recording. That should work. Oh, it is. Oh, I left it. Oh my gosh, I can go out and get it real quick. I'll go grab it, Peggy.
Bunch of minutes. Where we're wearing, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. What? Still, I just wear over. Yes. Busy. Busy. Well, we're all this. Yeah. Make sure you see the making covers, but so yeah, it's
It looks like mine.
Okay. Let me do the intro. Okay, Mike is here.
I think I should. Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. Dave, you made it. Everyone's still alive, still slightly alert, and there's coffee on the outside table if you didn't get it. So just wanted to give you guys a quick thank you finally for coming out for the MOMCC conference. It's been a really amazing 3 days. And we still have a couple of fantastic sessions to go through. It's kind of clothing row here for the first one. So if you're sitting through this awesome presentation, make sure you go and take a peek at the clothing exhibit next door as well. Kind of in between sessions because they've got quite a selection as well. But we're very excited to be in this space. I just want to just remind everybody we're going to do evaluations at the end of this. So I'll make sure to pass those out. And if you can please just put it in the envelope before you leave, that's very helpful. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our board member to get things started.
Hello, everybody. It is my great pleasure to introduce Eric Smallwood. He is the Director of Education and Lead Curator at the Merchant Taylor Museum. He recently took over as the Site Administrator of the Constitution Hall State Historic Site in Lake Compton, Kansas. Eric previously worked as the Site Administrator for the Bridget Lake State Historic Site in Kansas City for almost up to 2 years. His talk yesterday was amazing. I expect it to be amazing today. Everybody give it up for Eric Smallwood.
Does the microphone work? Oh, yeah. Should I use the microphone or should I just holler?
It's fine.
Microphone? Okay, perfect. I feel too powerful. I like French Lecompton. I like that. Usually we just say they're straight out of Lecompton. Not as much gang violence there, but there's some violence. If you've never been to Lecompton, it's well worth the visit. There's 2 museums. There's the Lecompton Historical Society. It's more local history, and then I'm over at Constitution Hall. I've been there since pretty much mid-November, and it is, at the time was where the territorial houses met before Kansas was a state. From about early 1857 to about late 1850. They moved it to Lawrence. Something about slavery. They didn't get the town anymore, and I get it. But it's a really cool town now. Keep downtown. I'm probably gonna regret this, but there's a fantastic antique store in town. Lots of really cool stuff there. But we're here today to talk about the importance of detail in historic settings and primarily in reproductions. So what makes something a reproduction? Coffee on the original. If it's, you can make things in the idea of something, but a perfect reproduction, in my opinion, is something that's going to be like similar, 1-to-1, or close to it to an extent. But before we talk about the detail, I want to talk about why that's even important. Putting this program together, partly because I started in a new position, as I'm sure a lot of us do, when you start something new, I reread Interpreting Our Heritage just to brush up. Every time I've read this probably a dozen times, and every time I read it, I get a really different perspective. And with the age in which we live today, it reads a little different every time that you revisit it. And I was reading this time through the context of detail, basically. Is it important? And I'm sure some of you, myself included, probably thought that this program was going to be, these are the things you do in a reproduction. But like everything, there's variation. Every single one of us in this room, we're dressed a little differently. And that's not necessarily a reflection of our social or economic class, or who we are, or where we're from, but we're all different. Each person has those different personality traits or personal preferences that we have. So reading through this and putting this together, I kind of have a new idea or a new perspective of what I think actually matters in the grand scheme of things. So before we start, I want everyone to close their eyes. Want us to go around, grab wallets and pockets. While your eyes are closed, I want you to imagine what a kitchen could have looked like in a typical household in Kansas in 1860. So before the Manhattan House was built, it could be the first house if you want it to be. Imagine what that looks like. Think of all the things on the shelves. Think of what it smells like, what it sounds like, what the people look like, what's going on in there. Think of that atmosphere. Now open your eyes. It'll look pretty much like this. For some of us, it might have. When I was testing this program out on my girlfriend, this is basically the only 1860s kitchen she's seen. So this is what she thought of. And I said, well, I'm definitely going to put that in the program. But all of those things that we think of in your scene are based on your perception of what you have experienced up until this point in time. If you've seen historical films, if you've seen living history sites, whether it's yours or somewhere else, if you look at lithographs, if you look at paintings, if you look at photographs, those are all things that go into our perception. The underlying theme in all of this are parts and wholes. If you haven't read Interpreting Our Heritage, go get it, go read it, go listen to it on Audible. It's a pretty good read. Even if you work in the field, you gotta read it. And one of the principles, or at least one of the things Tilden talks about quite a bit, is the parts and wholes of interpretation, but the parts and wholes of more or less just everything, human experience. And I think that that's kind of going to be the underlying theme of the whole program is you can't have the whole without the part, and you can't have a part without addressing it. Those are kind of some different things that we may not think about a whole lot. Our job, we are the boots on the ground, whether you're making interpretive programs, whether you're giving the interpretation, whether you're just there in the background. We are all there for one reason and one reason only, and that is to basically to cultivate understanding. So Tilden didn't quote, he didn't write this. He even in the book talks about, he got this from a national park manual. He doesn't know who wrote it. I wish we did. I use it too much. I wish I could credit a real person, who wrote it. But Tilden really liked this, and I like it a lot. Through interpretation, understand. That's how you understand the thing that you're looking at, whether you're staff, whether you're a visitor. Through understanding brings appreciation. You can't appreciate something unless you understand it. That's true with everything in life, in my opinion. And through appreciation, we'll bring protection. Nobody's going to want to save a site they don't really care about, and they don't care about it if they don't understand it. And so we are basically, as interpreters, as just human beings, we are basically the keepers of the past. We are the keepers of the understanding. It's our job to help everybody understand. If we like something really particular, if we like something specific, it's our job to help others to see what we see. So how can artifacts help us understand? First of all, what is an artifact? What makes an artifact?
Made by humans.
Yeah, it's made or affected by humans. Humans have to be involved in there. Squirrel nest, a stone can be an artifact if it's been altered by human hands. A piece of wood can be an artifact. A bone can be an artifact. So if it's even a part of an animal remain, that can be an artifact if it's been altered, if it's been scraped or cooked or used. And when we think of artifacts, at least a lot of the time when I talk about this stuff with people, they think of archaeological artifacts, things that are underground, in the water. But everything in this room is an artifact, unless you guys got weird stuff in your pocket. But artifacts can teach us a lot of things. It can teach us what something looked like, what it felt like, how it was made, maybe why it was made in that way, who owned it, why was it preserved, why does it exist today, when was it from, how was it used. Those questions can go on and on and on and on because we are used to looking at things. We interact with things all the time. But in my opinion, the context is what makes an artifact important. And I thought about this quite a bit, and don't hate me. Without context and proper interpretation of the context, that's the key. Any artifact is just a thing. Lincoln's chair, if you go to Greenfield Village, if you go to the Henry Ford Museum, the chair Lincoln was shot in with the hair oil stains along the back of it, that's just an old crappy chair. I got like a similar one at home. But what makes it important is what it was for, what it was used for, when it was used, why it was used, what was the significance of it. That's what makes it really important. On the flip side of that, without the context of artifacts and information, interpretation is not information, but you need that information, historical stories can become misunderstood and fictionalized. You guys ever, I don't condone the use of AI in any way, but you guys ever see AI pictures of stuff people put prompts into and it looks janky? That is our perceptions, but that's a computer's perception. Our perception, when you imagine things, when you imagine that kitchen, I'm sure some of us, like, Mary probably thought of all of the teeny tiny little aspects of everything in the room, but a lot of us don't know a lot of those things, and you don't know what you don't know. And so without knowing all of those little details, you have an incomplete picture. We can't all be, incredibly knowledgeable, but we can try. That's kind of the effort. Something that bugs me quite a bit, I'm sure it bugs everybody in here, when you watch a historical piece, like a period piece of film, I wanted the good Lord Bird to be good so oh man, it deserves to be good so bad. And then you watch it in the material culture, in my opinion, I think it takes away from the context. It takes away from how important it was. And that's the difference, I think, and a lot of us in here do this, or at least are working in the field. I think that is the big difference between costumed interpretation and living history interpretation. Are you wearing history? Are you acting history? Or are you trying to live the history, live in it, in the moment, in the scene, in the context? I think that those are things that I think that all of us should think about all the time. Those are things that I ponder every single day. I go back and forth on a daily basis on whether I think living history is good or bad for people's understanding. And it all depends on how the interpreter is. It doesn't matter about how, their coat is sewn, or if their buttonholes are hand sewn. Don't get caught up in all that. The details that I'm going to talk about, I'll include some of that, but the details I'm going to talk about is why you choose certain things. What are the things that matter to the audience? What are the things that matter toward the understanding? Don't lose the forest in the trees, if you will. Artifacts are all interpretive tools. They're physical things. Those physical tools can be clothing, cookware, furniture, a pet, a farm animal. Those are interpretive tools. Maybe not an object, but it is a physical thing. You can pick up a sheep, show somebody a sheep if you want. Hand tools, buildings are artifacts. Interpreters can be artifacts, whether you're in a period clothing, type of outfit or not. And visitors can be artifacts. If you have 5 people in a room and you're talking about people sitting at a table, those people, whether they're in period costume or not, they're sitting at the same table. They are part of the scene, part of the interpretation. Those physical tools can help us to learn intangible meanings. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir for a lot of this. I promise it's going to get somewhere. But those intangible meanings are the context. That's what that can kind of unlock. Emotions, values, ideas, beliefs, systems, religious systems, political systems, economic systems. You can't talk about slavery without getting into some intangible themes and some meanings. That's what we do. And that's how artifacts can help us to actually unlock, in my opinion, the full potential of interpreting anything. Whether you're interpreting one artifact for a museum exhibit or a whole scene. If you're on a whole living history farm, you got a lot of artifacts around. And so all of those things are parts of the whole. And all those parts, I think, deserve to be at least tried to be done in a pretty good way. I brought an original shirt. If you guys were here yesterday, you probably saw this. And I'll have this up here to check out. I like this shirt quite a bit because of how detailed it is. We can pretty much dissect the parts and holes of the shirt. We can say this is what a shirt from the 1860s looked like. We can say this is a shirt kind of like they even have. This is something Abraham Lincoln wore. Look how detailed the handiwork is. If you, and you can come up after the program and take a look. Those of you who saw this yesterday, nothing makes me feel like less of a person than looking at shirts. That super detailed stuff. But that doesn't really matter because the context of it is who made it. Well, most shirts in the mid-19th century were made by women, whether they were mass-produced or not. A lot of the factories we think of, clothing, ready-made clothing factories, they're cutting facilities. You pick them up in bulk. You may have you and your family members work on them. That's a household income. It's not a cottage industry, but it's a household family industry all across the country, north and south. The cloth, in a lot of cases, is European, usually Irish linens, really fine linen. That demonstrates, or at least represents, the global trade. We're not living in a bubble. You didn't fall out of a coconut tree. We all live in the entire world. There is not a second world across the ocean. We're all on the same planet. We are all living in the same context all the time, then and now. It's important to, I think, connect people with that. If you're like me, you never left the state you lived in until you were after 18 years old. Some people don't really get to do that. I get visitors all the time. I get visitors at Grinner Place, or used to at least, that have never been outside of Kansas. Dude, you live like miles from the border. You've never been to Branson? Like, come on. So there's a lot of things that we don't think about. We don't know everybody's experiences or their perceptions or what their context is. And I think it's important to always just be open-minded about that, but to always be willing to address the whole, whether it's your whole, the object's whole, the artifact's whole, the visitor's whole, or just the interpretive whole. So when do you use a reproduction artifact? How many of us have reproduction artifacts at your site or at home in your closet? So that's good, unless you guys have a whole site outfitted with originals. That's really cool. But can the artifact be harmed by using it? If you're going to use, I can't find reproduction glassware. Sometimes I use original glassware when I go out and do 1850s stuff. If it breaks, it can break. It's glass. It's not, it's not sturdy. It's not going to handle getting dropped. Can an original serve the function better than a replica? In some cases, if you want to learn what it's like to live in the 1850s, for example, you got to wear a watch. If you wear a watch that's not from that period or before, are you learning the full extent of it? Do you have to wind it every 6 hours and know that it skips an hour every few hours? And those are little things that you have to worry about and keep paying to watch guy to fix it every few months. So those are things you have to think about. Sometimes originals can serve way better purposes than reproduction. Somebody has to literally make a reproduction. They have to make an original. It's already been done, thankfully, for us. Oops. Could a reproduction come close enough to interpret it fully? If I'm going to interpret the importance of the care and work that went into a shirt, one of dozens of shirts that would have been bought together, they were selling shirts by the dozens a lot of the time in ready-made stores. If I make a shirt and it's not as detailed, or not even respectfully as detailed, or close to as detailed as an original, does it get the point across? Or does it seem like it's something I threw together? Do we think now that our perception now looking back is, did they throw them together? Maybe. We don't know. Without, more detail, those are things we gotta miss. Those are, I guess, gaps. Those are opportunities that can be lost if you're not careful. How costly could it be to replace Some things are very expensive. That frock coat back there on the table is pricey. You don't want it to get torn up. If you're going to get a coat or a clothing item or physical artifact or a stove or put new flooring into a site, you don't want that to be a thing that's going to get destroyed and you have to replace and your site's going to go bankrupt because of it. You want to make sure you're being pretty costly or pretty financially responsible. Could an original artifact be unsafe to use? I use them, but do you use? I use them, but do you use original, Chinaware plates? We were just talking about this the other day, and I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but for some people that might be the line in the sand. They don't want to cross that. They don't want to get lead poisoning, and I get it. I'm probably in too deep at this point. So you might want to use things that are reproductions that are safer, that are made differently. That can be an important thing. Sometimes if you're using original tools, wood can be dry rotted. They don't work as intended. Original sewing machines aren't as smooth as they were 150 years ago when they were made new. Pocket watches, for crying out loud, half the time aren't, nearly as good now, or at least they don't work as well now as they did when they were made new in the time period. Are there even usable originals, available? There are a lot of things that there are zero examples on this earth, or if there are, I haven't seen them. That's a really important part of that. It's really hard to source things sometimes, and sometimes you're only going off of a photo or a description or painting. Make a reproduction. Wing it. I don't know if it's considered a true reproduction, but make a modern version of it. And what does your budget tell you to do? There's a lot of cheat codes out there. You can get away with doing things that people won't notice. And I'm going to talk about that later because I think sometimes we think that visitors are a little more ignorant than they actually are. There's some ignorance. So reproduction artifacts can be useful in a lot of ways. They can offer opportunities to learn things that you couldn't learn from the original. I'm not going to let any of you wear that shirt, but I would let you put on and wear a shirt that's a new one, that is sturdy, that somebody has made in the modern day. Because if it gets ruined, you can make another one. I can't make another 160-year-old shirt. So ways you can learn from that, you can learn a lot of things from that. You can learn how people moved, how people pretty much, well, I guess I could probably read on the slide, how it was made, how it was used, why was it even used in that way? Why are pocket watch chains shaped the way that they are? Why are suspended buckles shaped the way they are? Why are pants tailored the way they are? Why are boots and shoes made the way they are? And how do people move them? How do you function? If you've never worn period clothing, when you get high quality reproduction clothing and you're wearing it and you're doing physical work, I'll bet $100 it won't take long before you break something and you're going to realize, oh, I wasn't wearing it the way it is supposed to be worn. And sometimes those things aren't obvious to us. Even to people that make the stuff, even people that wear the stuff, those are things that are, it's a learning curve. It's always a learning curve. But more importantly, I think that you find new purposes of a reproduction, interpretive purposes, and you find new perspectives and opportunities to hone in on things to talk about or things to interpret. These are all little parts of the whole. The whole could be a whole pair of overalls. The whole could be a whole scene, a whole working scene. If you're rebuilding part of the Transcontinental Railroad, if you're redoing part of the Transcontinental Telegraph line, those are all wholes. But you need to have the details, otherwise it kind of turns into that AI-generated thought. It's an idea of, inspired by, or, it's not quite, I don't know if it does it justice. I was going to use Comic Sans font for this, but I was told that I might get beat up outside. So something that gets talked about a lot in the living history world, at least with the folks that I can run around with, is, I don't really like the term, I think it's kind of cheesy, but experimental archaeology. Tilden talks about in one of his chapters, I forget which chapter it is, one of these bookmarks, he talks about these European archaeologists that dug up a stone axe and they wanted to figure out how was it used. Well, they took the original out and they cut down trees with it. They realized pretty quick that they had to do things in a different way. You can't use it like a metal axe or an iron steel axe. You have to use smaller, closer chopping motions, but you can get the job done. That's a learning curve. Those are things you wouldn't know. You don't know what it's like to live in ancient Greece as a hoplite until you've put on the shoes and walk. You got to walk a mile in their shoes, figuratively, but doing it literally helps quite a bit too. And if you do things with higher quality reproductions, you can learn more. You know, it's all of those details are all parts of the whole. And what can you take from the whole if some of the parts are missing? This is, Jim Miller. If you ever read his For the Love of History blog, great guy, fantastic historian. I love this picture. I wish it was a higher resolution. But he wrote a great article on 19th century fly fishing, river fishing. Experimenting by experience, I think, is what experimental archaeology really is. But through artifacts, through doing and living. You're not wearing history, you're living it, you're doing it. You're trying to learn through experience. And we as people, we all learn through experience. That's just how we are. Nobody faults the rookie, or nobody faults the intern that actually sends a mass email that was supposed to go to one guy, and then a whole company gets a weird vacation email, and it's a whole nightmare. Yeah, it's fine, he's new. Doesn't matter, But if you've been there for 10 years, it's like, come on, dude. It's like the fifth time you're on this, There's some leeway. So doing and living and experiencing, that's how we progress as a person. And that's how we progress as an interpreter, or just, anything in life. Tilden doesn't call it experimental archaeology. He refers to this as parts of physical or practical interpretation. Now, that's just a part of his whole. Physical and practical interpretation is a whole in this instance. Experimental archaeology is just one of the parts of it. And this is a scene. These are two of my friends, Aaron and Ben. We were out gold mining on Ben's gold claim a few years ago, and we were using reproduction rocker box he made off of specks he found from the Colorado Gold Rush. We built a little bridge across the river. We were using the tools and doing the thing. We were learning what it was like to be a prospector in the Pikes Peak Gold Rush in 1864. It was really cool. We didn't find anything broke. But it was really awesome. I found out a lot. I should have brought a gold pan, but brought some other random stuff. You find out some of the important details of why things were made the way they are. Why is the solder kind of sloppy, but almost wiped completely off of the inside of the gold pans? We have original gold pans. We know what they look like. They're all milk pans. Don't tell anybody. That's a little secret. They're all milk pans. But you can tell when one's made to be a gold pan because the solder is almost wiped completely off. And that's because your black dirt or your black soil, your iron soil remnants that get in there with the gold, that's heavy stuff. It falls in the groove. If you're using a milk pan or a reproduction gold pan, they don't have that because people want it to be high quality. They don't think about accurate quality. And so these are things you learn through using it. Those are things, part of many things I feel like that we've all learned kind of throughout using reproductions ourselves. Tilden breaks it down into two forms. Practical interpretation can be demonstration or participation. Demonstration, he uses the example of there's guys sitting around at a pub, they're hanging out, they're drinking, as dudes do. One of them goes, hey man, how many teeth do you think a horse has? And the other guy goes, 40. And so the other guy chimes in and goes, that's definitely like 30 teeth. So they're bickering back and forth, and one guy stands up and goes, you know what? I'm going to get a horse. He goes outside, and he brings in the horse. Bringing in the horse, that is demonstration. You are learning through an example. You are getting a thing in front of you to examine it, to see, to learn from it. It's in front of you. That is basically how demonstration is. We all do demonstrations at our jobs. Participation can be a little harder. It's doing it for yourself. You are the horse. You are becoming the horse to learn how many teeth the horse has. That's kind of a weird analogy, but you're learning through experience. So it's the difference between doing it for you and you doing it with me or with the interpretive theme. But either way, it must be something, and I said this in air quotes, special to the visitor. They may not think it's special, but it's got to be something that they can't just get anywhere else. They might be able to do it at home, but will they? And how will they know how to do it? You can pass on participation without even being there. Bensold Ford is a good example. If you've ever been there, you park, you walk a third of a freaking mile to the fort from the parking lot. It's terrible. Walking it every day was terrible. About a month into working there, I started to realize, we make people walk it because we need them to participate in being on the trail, on taking a part of that journey. That's a really cool aspect I didn't think about for like a good chunk of work in there. But after I realized it, and people would complain about, "Man, that walk stinks, dude. Can't you guys get a golf cart or something and carry us over?" And I said, well, we could, but now you also walked part of the Santa Fe Trail from the parking lot. That's pretty cool stuff. That's part of participation. Demonstration could be going to Gettysburg National Military Park and watching a military group demonstrate what an entire regiment, like the 1st Minnesota, looked like on the field of battle in front of you. Doing the movements, doing the action, that's demonstration. That can be pretty darn cool. It's like watching a documentary, watching a movie. But participation could be joining those living historians. This was back in 2013, sesquicentennial. You could join those historians or join the interpreters and do the thing yourself. This was a cool program, and I thought this is my favorite example of participation. We had about 1,000 visitors that came out for this, all over the world. We had people from Germany, Belgium, Russia, Missouri, all over the place. So all those third world countries. No. So I love this example because if you look way up there, Scott Herwig and us, there were only about 200 of us, not even that much, portraying part of the Iron Brigade, famed Iron Brigade. If you've seen Gettysburg, if you've read about Gettysburg, they're the black hats, the guys with the big old red dots on their hats as their core badge. All that stuff, those are details. Seeing the details in what you were learning from, that's important stuff. But those visitors got to experience it. The detail that they got the most out of that program, in my opinion, the thing that they learned from the most wasn't all of the little nitpicky things that we did to make sure our things were exactly right based on accounts and photos and references. They walked it. They walked like 5 or 6 miles, which for some people, that's a lot. For me, it's a lot. So, and that was a cool program. It was like 100 degrees. We didn't have very many people fall out. There were some guys there that I really didn't think were going to make it, and they did it, and they got to the end because they wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to join us in that experience. There's a third form of physical and practical interpretation that Tilden calls animation, but he also kind of sums it up into atmosphere. And that, there's always atmosphere all around. I just call it the vibe. It's just how is the vibe? If the vibe is off, if the atmosphere is a little weird and uncomfortable, you're not going to allow yourself to see new understandings. You're not going to allow yourself to experience the interpretive themes. And atmosphere is pretty special, I think, because, first of all, animation, that makes sense. You're bringing history alive. We do that all the time with living history. That's kind of what we do. But animation can create atmosphere. It's kind of learning by being a part of the setting, which is the history. When people come to Constitution Hall, and this, I can't take credit for this, this is something that Tim Roos did that I really want to keep going. When people walk on the floor on the lower level, you are in the Territorial Land Office. Built in late 1856 by Samuel Jones, Sheriff of Douglas County. He burned and sacked Lawrence in 1856, about 6 months before he built it. Those are details that are cool. But the real detail that I think is important is the floor is real. It's original. It's the exact same floor. It's Eastern Cottonwood, State Tree of Kansas. But you're walking on it when you're there, just like all of these people we know. It's like 20,000 acres of land sold. Just in 1857, you are joining them and standing in the public room. You are in the DMV office, standing, waiting in line like everybody else did. That's special stuff. You are basically being a part of that and animating the room without even being costumed. And it's not a living history setting. You are just filling the space like it's been filled for the past 170 years. Atmosphere allows a space, pretty much it allows the space to experience a site or your own history. This isn't just for the visitor, this is for everybody. I think I've taken away from all the things I've done in my, I'm not experienced. I'm young, I'm new. I have hopefully a long life ahead doing stuff like this. Some of the best takeaways I've ever had at sites have been as a staffer, as an employee. Maybe there's not even a visitor there, maybe there is, but just being in the atmosphere, you learn a lot. You really learn a lot. You can look at a painting, you can look at a photograph, you can read a description, but living it and seeing the parallels and seeing where things cross, that I think is really special. Sometimes the best atmosphere is provided by Mother Nature. My favorite site experience my whole life was just a couple years ago. I was at Fort Laramie. I stopped. Really busy day. Gorgeous. I think it was early October. All of the leaves were a golden brown. I just went down and I sat on the river. I just kind of sat there. I sat there for like, and I cried like a baby because it was the most gorgeous. It was the most gorgeous scene I've ever seen in my life. And it was just cool to think about what things looked like back then, just to imagine it. And I don't know. I don't know much about Fort Laramie, even today. I read a lot of the signs and saw the exhibits. It was a fantastic site. There were no living history interpreters. The only guy working was over in the visitor center. Pretty much got my stamp, bought my magnet, went on my way. But I really felt like I took a takeaway. I appreciated the site a whole heck of a lot more by just the atmosphere. And all of that had nothing to do with the National Park Service. It was purely just, it's pretty much just the Wisconsin. It was just the Wyoming fall and the autumn. And it just was gorgeous. It was wonderful. And I think that we sometimes can get caught up in interpreting to a visitor. We don't think about the details that aren't said or told. You know, people are always perceiving, and all those things change our perception. That's how we understand. The more you're exposed to something, it changes your perception, and that's how we really change our mind on a lot of things. Despite what Tom Hanks tells you in the Polar Express, seeing is believing. Believing can be seeing too. Don't get me wrong. But when you see something in front of you, yeah, you know, if Sasquatch walks through the door right now, realize it's not a guy in a mask, we're all probably freak out. We'll be like, oh, you know. With artifacts and reproductions, originals, being intentional with how they're detailed or being intentional with how a scene can be detailed is really important. This has been sold for, I helped kind of rearrange. This is the Mexican laborers' quarters. If you go, that's what it's labeled as. At the time, you know, Fort was rebuilt in the 1970s, about 50 years ago. One of the big problems I have with interpreting low-class, sometimes ethnic settings, it's kind of easy for us, you know, me and you know, a lot of us in here being white people, it's hard for us to connect with some of that sometimes. It's really easy to just assume that because somebody was poor, the space can be empty. Space can be dirty. It doesn't really matter. It's just a poor settler. It's just, you know, 10 Mexican laborers living in one room. What did it really look like? Well, knowing that they had kids, putting some different toys on the table, showing domestic trade goods, showing buffalo robes, mattress ticks, dishes, piles of wood, having it living, you know, and I know a lot of us do that already. I think that's important stuff. Being intentional with how you do it. How will the visitor see it? Is he going to walk in and notice that there's just a big pile of stuff behind him that he can't see? Or should we place things in a way that looks like it's going to just jump out and press play and keep going, kind of like film? With being intentional, you have some options. There's a whole spectrum. Every site, everything's different. You can try to fill a space with as much as possible, which I usually love, but it's not always the right answer. Looking full is a big deal. This is Fort Laramie. This is looks like probably 80s U.S. Cavalry barracks. If I remember right, there's a lot of buildings up there. What are some takeaways we see? What are some things that we could look at this and tell from the scene? You can put your hand up if you want. What are some things we notice in this room? One of the beds isn't made. Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic one. That wasn't even one I had at the bottom. What else did we notice? There's no privacy. No, not really. Do they have a lot of stuff? Where's their personal stuff? It's trunks. Do you think they could keep a lot of personal stuff? How much personal stuff do we like to have today? Too much. Yeah. I was bringing way too much stuff.
So one thing I noticed is that it is all very neatly made up, but it's not perfect. It's not crisp. It's a little rumpled. It's a little like we were in a rush to make a bed. It's not like picture perfect.
So who do we think lived in this space?
Good.
Yeah. So six for my answer. I was going to say human beings. Not a most
Soldiers.
man. I guess that's that. I love it. So that's what I was looking for. It's not perfect. It is a lot of stuff, but it still represents people. Now on the flip side, you got to St. Louis to the U.S. Grant House. This is one of the rooms in the Grant House. I love this thing, but I look empty. And there's some stuff in the room, but I almost feel like it would have been better if there was nothing. Because there's not enough. There's just enough for you to think that it was distant and there's a disconnect. You know, we might have tables and chairs in our house, but nobody lives like this. Grant definitely didn't have one of these IKEA lamps. There's interpretive sign, so there's info, so it's not completely empty. It's a good interpretive site, but emptiness can be a double-edged sword. If you want something to look empty because of the theme you're interpreting, leave it empty, leave it pretty sparse. If you want it to look livable, if you want something to take away the human experience or the human themes from that, put some stuff in it. It doesn't even matter if it's the right stuff, put something in it. Because people are going to go to a site, I'll never go back to this site. I feel like I saw everything there was to see. But sites like Happy, sites like Steamboat Arabia, sites like Fort Laramie, Fort Larned, Las Golondrinas in Santa Fe, I'm going to go back every time I can because there's always more to see because they may not even put on purpose, they seem intentional with how things are. And that's not just in living history spaces or open air museums. If you have actual exhibit space, it's the same thing. I want to say this is the Fort Pitt Museum. Maybe wrong. Looks, fresh than anymore. I love this exhibit because you can walk around the exhibit and learn all those little details. Does the sign talk about all of this guy's details on his uniform or his cap, what he's working on? Maybe. But if you never read it, we all know how people like to read stuff all the time. You can look at it and tell intangible meanings just through how it's placed intentionally, how details are intentionally put into reproductions. Conventional museums, these aren't reproductions, but if you went to the Arabia this weekend, how much stuff was there? It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. What's the takeaway you take from that when you leave? People had a lot of stuff. They were importing a lot of stuff out here. It's an eye-opening experience. If you think you knew what the West looked like, go to this or go to the Bertrand. It was a whole other world. It was way more like us today than I think we probably think half the time. And in some cases, emptiness can be good in a conventional or bad in a conventional museum setting. I love the Nelson Atkins Museum. They got tons of stuff. I've spent probably dozens of hours in that museum. I love that they don't change everything out because I like seeing the same things every time. I like that they do change some things out sometimes because it's nice to see something new. But sometimes when you walk into a space, especially if it's in between, if you guys are working on an exhibit or if something's not quite, if it's in between temporary exhibits, sometimes things can look empty and sometimes that can spark wonder. I should come back another time and see what they put in here. But sometimes that can almost seem like they didn't care what you thought. They didn't care if there was nothing in this room. I've been to some museums numerous times out east that I've loved. I'm from West Virginia, so I go to Fort Necessity and I go to some of those sites. I love Fort Necessity. It's a fantastic example on why you should always keep learning and always keep researching because they learn new things all the time. Rebuild the fort when you learn more information. But the fort was empty. Granted, Washington was only there for like a night, so it didn't really matter. But having some stuff in there would probably help. And those are all things that, also, depend on, is the building staffed? Is someone going to steal it? Do you want it to come up missing or break?
But if you put anything else in that room, it's a distraction from the art that is why you're there.
It can be. And so it can be a good thing as well. If you have one prime piece, if you have your centerpiece, and that's your interpretive whole, you don't really need all the other parts because it can take away from it. That's exactly right. So it depends on what you're doing. I think whether it's full or empty, doing it with intention, just think about it. I was talking earlier, I watched a video the other day about, yesterday, actually last night, on Tilden. He interviewed 1975, 50 years ago, it was the year before the bicentennial. The interviewer asked him, how do you think people should interpret the bicentennial? And in typical Tilden fashion, he gone, and you're like, what the heck is he talking about? History and politics and youth movement, hippies, and you're like, good Lord, dude. And then he just kind of lands the plane, and you're like, oh, that's the whole. And his main point was that all of interpretation, how we interpret the bicentennial, how we probably should interpret the 250th, it's all to provoke thought. We don't really, who are we to make somebody think a certain thing? We want them to think, for God's sake, just think something sometimes, people. You know how visitors can be every once in a while. And you want them to think about something. So doing it with intention, I think, helps. We're going to take this scene. This is a painting here in front of me. It's an 1854 painting called Taking the Census. It is from, oh yeah, Francis William Edmonds. It was painted in 1854. This was painted the same year Kansas Territory. It's great. I love this portrait. It's one of my favorites. What are some details we see in our scene? There's a clock. And George Washington. What else do we see? There is a nice headscarf. Are they upper class? Is this guy even upper class?
Doesn't need it.
Oh, really? Doesn't need to be. How do we know? We don't know what's in his wallet. Money isn't culture. We don't know that. What else do we notice? Oh yeah, there's a snuff bottle right there, isn't it? They're literate. They have books. These are some different things I noticed. It's hard to see in the light. There's tools right here. It's a working farm. It's a working family. To some extent, there's a shovel and a pick, a wash tub right here. It's a little hard to see in the light. There's clothes and just junk piled on top of the wardrobe. How neat are all this? I'm not. So, I have stuff piled everywhere. They're doing something. They're living in the space. You have water heating right here on the pink toilet. There's a book down here on the ground. I didn't even notice until just now. There's a hat laying on the ground. There's lots of kids running around. You've got stuff on the table. There's a lot going on. 1854, very, very, very patriotic era. You have a picture of George Washington. There's a lot of holes you can interpret from. There's a lot of holes you can draw from just from all of the little parts that we see.
The tough part is there are things in those paintings that meant something then.
Yes.
That told you what political party they were. They told you what their income was. They told them what they did for a living.
Yeah.
And we don't know that. And if you look at 200 paintings, maybe you start to get a hint. But
That's exactly. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I've been studying blankets and 17th century paintings, and you can tell there's a couple classes of blankets and when they're out of date, when they're not out of date, and you knew it then, but now we're clueless, and
Yeah.
we need to share that with each other. There are hints in that painting, we don't have a clue what they
How do we discover this? That's
help me with that.
Yeah, how do we discover this? How do we discover those little hidden?
He's the with pitches. So there's a genre painter from Northern Illinois. He's an abolitionist. He paints a lot of abolitionists. They're all holding abolitionists. So once you realize that if they're holding that newspaper,
I didn't put it in this slideshow. I've been looking at a lot of the George. First of all, he is a master of portraits, like personal portraits. My favorite thing about him, he was really well known in the period for painting the different hues of black. In an era where men were wearing a heck of a lot of black, this was the uptick in American capitalism in the 1840s and 50s. We are, becoming a world-class economic power. Black was the color of business. A lot of people wore black waistcoats, black coats, black pants, black hats, black ties, silk, wool, cotton, all that stuff. It dyes differently. You have different undertones. People knew that, and they could see it. They saw it every day. Freeman was really good at painting those different hues. But then when you look at some of the larger scenes, he paints a lot of wacky stuff, real weird stuff. But my favorite part about those is, as weird as some of that is, and you should never base anything that could be, don't base a reproduction off of something that could be just completely artistic license. But all of those models were real people that he did. So all of those little personal tendencies you see, they're details, and if you dig through all that and find references to it, you might be able to learn about who the people were. And then you might learn why he painted them. I think, that's unrelated to that, but that's something I think is kind of like.
You also want to look at the 1850 census to know what questions he's asking, why he's counting on his fingers, and
Maybe we don't even know what's in that book.
well, every census doesn't ask the same question.
No, it doesn't. I wish.
Yeah.
It'd be really easy. Yeah, you go back far enough, and it's. We're checking half the time.
Also, William Sidney, painting,
Absolutely.
Long Island. He shows worn clothing.
Yes.
Why is this worn? And I finally figured it out. After wearing the same thing for 3 years, why the armhole is worn. Because that's where it through last. Why are the tops of the pockets worn because I'm in them all the time? Why are they out of the vest worn? Because I'm pulling it down.
Absolutely. I love that because one of the examples I was going to bring up was my friend Aaron wrote a little article about wearing waistcoats. Literally exactly what you're talking about. And you came to the same conclusion as he did. My dad wrote that article. You know, he really put much of anywhere. We needed a program on it. And he came to the exact same conclusions, the same exact places. When you're tugging down on your vest to keep it down over your trousers so you don't get your shirt riding up, getting in and out of your pockets, that's the exact same conclusions. And you learned that through experimental archaeology, through experience. Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't even expect that. So intentional details, this is a Fort Cabot in West Texas, Marty Robbins country. And we see a scene, I'm not going to really talk about too much about what the group is, but we see some of the details. What do we think's going on here? Some kind of store, right? They're selling, looks like canned or bottled fruit, that looks like alcohol, those almost look like coconuts. It's a little confusing. But that could be a really interesting detail to interpret. You got canned food.
It's a place for people to gather.
It's a place for people to gather. What's the furniture made of?
Wood, pretty simple.
It's pretty simple. Barrels, that's what stuff's coming in. These, whether you can tell or not, if you look hard enough, if you want to see those details, they're made from military grades. So they're blue painted. I think that's pretty neat. We know that people were doing that kind of stuff. I could pick through and be like, yeah, you know, if this is Fort McCabe in the 1850s, that isn't correct for the 1850s. It doesn't matter.
They're using dimensional lumber.
They are, oh yeah. That's
Where's the sawmill?
There probably was, yeah. There's a lot of holes you can pick with how intentional it is. Is the room clean? Yeah, it's honestly not that bad. But you get some of this detail as well. It kind of makes it still look, you don't want to put too much on it. Don't make it look too neat, too clean for people.
I was gonna say there are no paths in the gravel where people would have walked.
Maybe that would have been a good detail.
It's too clean.
I know we have a lot of time, and let's see. Do you guys want to take a quick break for a minute? Okay. Well, if you want to go use the bathroom for a second, you can. In the next 5 minutes, I'm going to have everybody look at the reproductions on tape. Take a look at them, pick them up, take a peek. We're going to, each tape wallet, we're going to take the reproductions that you have there, just pick at least one, or you want a few different parts or details that you can see in those reproductions, and I want you guys to just, without wearing in my clothes, but yeah, well, but take a look at them, and you guys got kind of a really special. You probably know what they are already, you've seen them, but yeah. And this is the only thing that's original. And I want you guys to compare this with the tinware. It came from, I was gonna bring a different one, I already had it in my car, so it worked out.
What I make something for thing.
Oh, yeah.
There's always pockets somewhere. Or those pages written on.
Oh, without your
And the size.
Is this
And no one ever sees it because it's in the voter. It's all. Yeah. At least it's on my name, but still, if you want another one. Yeah, that you buy, but you never find enough to do. Look at that, all three ball. What played on the 1850s? Who cares? It's fine.
So we got to make this guy. I can hold on to it. Take what seat they are.
This is. What? No.
The side.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Work machines.
Nice work. Yeah, I mean, they're all. But you can change.
Pictures done if, you know, guess what we do.
One of the things I'm thinking of was this picture, she's wearing earrings. She's just been on during the day. That's pretty cool. Yeah. I used to buy the books and then I went all around the pictures. I know it's what I was seeing. So.
You can make sure. So, especially for stuff.
But you know, looking at the blankets, there's a style of blanket that was on a style like 1700, but yet here's one in a painting in 1723, and it's all frayed and nasty and got a dead chicken on it kind of stuff. It meant something.
Yeah.
You know, this was expensive, but now it's
What's
being
like a new rate?
used up by the lower. Oh, hey,
That's great. You knew that they had it now.
where were the blankets under again?
We were talking.
Yeah, there's one picture of it still up. The guy's got the. Well, so next time you're at the park, and see if they'll show you the point blank.
Yes, I do. I'm saying.
Yeah, there too again.
What?
I thought this was a totally separate blue.
It can be, although, let's see. Yeah, I did this one based off of the, so there's a haircut guy that has an open shirt like this. And you can see the applied piece, it's a center beam like this, so I tried to copy this best I could. But the ones on the radio, for example, it's just kind of here, this is all. This is- So it depends, but there are some that are also completely separate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, but they hide.
I'm just, that's, they're not very many wolves out there, so.
I'm pretty sure it's wool. I actually wolves some fabric and they like it's silly to me. That is, but.
See, we're still missing. Maybe. We
There's
can.
some time.
We can do what we want.
Don't let it forget.
What's longer?
Yeah.
That was professional.
Like,
Yeah, you're a good one.
I'm not professionally, but I'm.
A lot of times they work here. It's the rest of the world. Like, yeah.
Springfield.
Oh, I think that's.
Alrighty.
I'm just, but then they also want to.
All right. Well, let's start over. Actually, looking at you guys, you got weird. I wasn't going to bring it, but I flew in my car last night. So I guess we'll sort of here. You guys have a little shirt, a little work shirt, and what is that guy? What's that? Forge cap, civil war forge cap. So,
Which enlisted men.
for enlisted men, so you got some details of context of what it is, who would award it. Is it officers? Nope, these are private sergeants, corporals, musicians, cavalry, artillery, there's a general service. But I know you were looking at this. What are some?
Maybe
It was maybe. This one
number
has
3.
a label, so it's a size number 3. There's a lot of context with it. What's a physical attribute you have with this? What did you notice with that? Or with this shirt?
They're both white.
See, I think that's light. What else? What about the shirt? What do you notice about it? What do you think?
I had to unbutton it because I thought the placket was, on those shirts, was a separate piece to cover up the shirt where a button's called fireman's shirt, some places.
Yeah. Not
Okay, why is it
there aren't,
placket? It's also a John Wayne shirt.
Oh, yeah. James Redknapp shirt here in Louisiana.
But I discovered that the placket that's on that is integral to the shirt itself.
It
You
is.
only open it on one side to get into the shirt.
Why would somebody want to wear one like this? What would you be doing? Why would you guys
Writing
wear
Lawrence.
Lawrence? Keep warm. When you guys are out doing work in the fall and winter, do you wear flannels? It's pretty much just a flannel. It's a wool flannel, but it's just a flannel.
Well, that piece on the front also would keep, if you're working in a barn, you don't want hay inside your shirt, keep your hay out.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of functionality to it. What did you guys have on the second table?
Pair of pants and a jacket.
All right, so we got a pair of pants and a boot. What have you noticed about the boot?
Pretty new.
It's pretty new. It's not broken in yet. Listen from the right angle. I wore it last week for a school group and should have waited a little bit. What about the pants? What do you notice on the pants? What are some of the details you guys might be noticing on here?
Mixture of hand sewn and machine sewn.
Who do you think made it? It's
you.
not me.
Oh,
Historically, who do you think could have made it? What can you take away from some of the handiwork? Other than it's consistent.
It doesn't have a label, so
Doesn't have a
it
lid.
may be made at home.
Could be made at home. There's a lot of guesswork involved. Do you think the boot was made at home?
no.
Probably not. It looked like it was a professional made boot. It was. If we didn't think Robert Land was a professional, he'd probably come down from Canada and beat us with those or something. I don't know. He's a nice guy. He probably wouldn't do that. The bottom of the boot. What do you notice on the bottom? What is it?
Tag.
It's pegs.
Yeah.
There's brass pegs here, wood pegs here. Has a heel plate. What's the sole made of? Does it have traction? It can. Unfortunately, we have concrete. No, concrete just kind of locks it out. But there's a lot of detail work from where Robert, when he made this, did a lot of work into it. This was not straight and left like this. It couldn't sound like it was all straight left. It is so. Is it tall or short? Why would somebody wear boots that are tall?
Keep hogs from biting legs.
Chocolate dog. Everyone's perception different. You might want to wear boots like this if you are maybe riding horse, maybe mining through gold, trudging through creeks and mud. There's a lot to it. The top of it's patent leather. You might want to make it look a little decorative, but it kind of goes right with the pants. What are the pants made of?
Maybe
Polished.
yeah. Half linen.
Oh, so it goes right with the boots. What you guys have? What are they for? Isn't that cool?
We're heading here. One of the things you're going to need is like, how was you're traveling? You're not. So it's not different. Including
All stuff in your pockets. All stuff in my pockets. I didn't think the coins went with anything else, so. I just like them. Where are the books? Where are you heading to? Where's it telling you to go? West. What's,
Iowa.
yeah,
It's, even though it's telling you to go to Nebraska and get the gold, on a gold plane, they want you to go through up the bluff. Everything in here is directed to get you to go to the bluff.
Most of the things we see today on road trips that make incentives to transport business. Billboards. Just like a billboard. Maybe. I think. So yeah, advertisements that just like today, for incentives to make you want to stop, make you want to bring commerce to certain communities. Some of these, like the Prairie Traveler, for example. Bring up Marcy's book, Prairie Traveler, the reproductions, really good reproduction. But it talks about personal stories, his experiences. So now you're learning through someone else's experiences from the period. That's kind of special stuff too. Do we still use books today? So, your phone's away. So we use books today. We learn through different ways. So when you're trying to connect with somebody, when you go on vacation, do you guys plan ahead? I don't. I wouldn't. A lot of sites closed. So you might have to plan ahead with guidebooks or with your own research.
Coins. I'm just looking, recently was sent a sale record from probate, Western Ohio, 1831. Lots of things to the penny, except for the stuff that happened. 12.5 cents, 37.5 cents, 87.5 cents. What does that mean?
What
It's
does
probably opportunity to take in advance. We didn't have Bitcoins. Books. Small detail.
Yeah.
In the 1830s, 40s. Yeah.
Do we have half pennies today?
No. Those were the only half in the sale was 12.5, 87.5. So some of the option was paid for the sale, same price. It's just you can have an auction at your site. Do some of the bidding or all of the bidding.
That's very
Even though the Spanish dollars were outside too, and having pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, because they do want some of that. But the sites are able to both say, yeah, I think Abraham Lincoln said he had an executive order in 64 that like outlawed for pregnancy because it was such it was going to be such a problem. It was weighing the federal things that they were trying to standardize. That's an interesting topic. It adds an aspect we might want to think about because these are mostly other than that stuff like Anglo white people. That adds a whole other perspective. If you do see Spanish gals or Mexican gals, that adds a whole other context. Who was there? Maybe it wasn't just who you thought. Maybe it wasn't who you pictured or the color of the people that you pictured in your mind. Create that mental image. What did you guys learn over here? Mm-hmm. What do you notice?
I was gonna add, so nicely made, but not like richly made.
I can't wait to tell them that.
Something nicely made. The cool thing on the inside is functional, right? It's not super decorative. I think you've seen like the Lincoln's Birch Brothers. They have a whole eagle like quilted it. This is functional quilting.
What kind of a person do you think could learn that? If you're interpreting as let's say you're doing a living history interpretation setting to some extent, if you're wearing that, if it's on the bed, open for people to see, what can they take away from that? What kind of person?
So it's double breasted, so maybe a little bit more of a dress look, but this is neither upper class nor poor. This is somewhere kind of just right in the middle.
It's in the past 20 minutes, but that's probably most of us here in the middle. And so that helps you kind of connect with some of that too. What about, let's see, did you guys pick it up? How heavy is it? Is compared to the pants, which are pretty thick, we always get the question, you know? And I'm sure we've thank goodness it's a shame the 20th century rules and JCPenney wanting to make everybody think all wool has to be this thick all of the time. It's not. That's why I brought it. This is just mainly just because I want people to see how wool can be soft and be comfy. This is wool. I mean, this is 100% merino. It's also a sweater that was turned into, but it's still pretty similar to things people want, and the texture's pretty close. If anything, it's a little too thick. Um, that's something I was that's what I was hoping to take away from it. It's detailed, it has padding, it's structured, but it's not. This coat should weigh less than 4 pounds. Most original front coats weigh that. Depends on the size and all that, what's made of. But middle of the road stuff, you don't want it to be shoddy. You don't want it to be shoddy. Respectable. What we see today. You guys got some cool stuff over here. What did we learn? We compared the original plate to the tin plate. What do you guys learn from those?
The template was really used.
It was really
Bend us.
I've taken that thing all over the place.
Yeah. You can use it.
Is it heavy? Is the cup heavy? Isn't it? I think it's hot at 10, but maybe these.
I think the plate's on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy, this was a scale up. Yeah, what was the plate? I got super quick story. When I lived in Gettysburg, Tim Sheed, the FNS rifle, really wanted to buy these cable plates. They are the best. One day he called me and he was like, hey, I'll let you know. Got me some stuff. I'm gonna play this plate for you. Pick it up. Heck yeah, Tim. I get there, he's like, $70. I was like, 10. I was like, oh, like, dude, call me and all right, so that's why I use it so much. What did you guys miss about this? Oh yeah, it is. It is. These don't make them anymore, unfortunately. I'm sure you guys probably have some of these. I wish I had more of these. I think it's sold as originals a lot. If you get real nitpicky, you notice there's no panel mark on the bottom. It is an applied top. What's this up here? It's foil. It's not exactly like original foil. If you guys went to the Arabia over the weekend, you probably saw foil on top of these exact pickle bottles. These are pickle bottles. If you get really into details, like if you have a glass collector that's a visitor at your site, he'll know the difference between this and a 3 area. Do you? Well, I mean, it was a pickle bottle. There's a label on it. But people may not even see it. It's a foil label. But it was blown by human hands or by human lungs. So these are things, these were all made by people. I think it's an interesting thing to take away is the human aspect of it. You guys got a really funky one. What's your thing?
Or whatever.
We see the three amigos. No. Fancy pants. These are called calzoneras. Are they normal? No, they're normal. What are these for? Where are these from? Where can you interpret with these? Up here?
Yeah, picture.
The furthest east I found a pair of calzoneras in a photograph of St. Louis. James White killed by Apaches, the White Party Massacre, January 1849, really close to Springer, New Mexico. He was killed wearing probably one of these. It's part of an ensemble that was Mexican influenced from old colonial Spain. You have a lot of that weird cultural influence that bleeds over, like everything else. White people love going somewhere new and going, "Dang, I'm gonna do that." When my dad went to Guadalajara last year, sent the picture, he bought a really nice like Panama hat, and his message was, "I feel like a true Mexican." And of course I'm like, "Dad, that's a little much." He needs So people have always been akin to adopt things, and in the 19th century people did too. So I made these pants because I wanted to interpret the influence of Mexican culture on Americans going to New Mexico with the Santa Fe trade. When we think of those poor New Mexicans, or even wealthy New Mexicans, in their feudal system, kind of like slavery out there, it's really easy to assume that they didn't have a lot, or that they were really poor and really dirty, and the craftsmanship might have been shoddy, and the materials were thick. But these aren't, and these are pretty good, I guess. They're pretty good reproductions off of what they were. But there's a lot of detail work. There were tailors everywhere. It doesn't matter if you live in New York City or Santa Fe, there are tailors, people that are craftsmen or women that make things, always have been, hopefully always will be. But these are different holes that I think are parts that you can add to the whole of human experience, human aspect, human difference. I think those are really important things to mention or address. My favorite takeaway I got from those, everybody, when they would see the events for it with these, you see it, it looks funky, you want to ask about it, you want to talk about it, and that opens the door to say, yeah, in fact, a lot of the Anglo clothing manufactured in the eastern part of the US and in Europe that was getting imported to Fort to Santa Fe, a lot of that stuff was junk. But people that, when materials are expensive, when time is money, you take time, you take that effort and you make things more detailed. I think that's really important stuff. We can't really get into the habit of assuming that we're not people. They're a little belled at the ankles. I copied we have an original pair of corduroy ones that are Anglo made, and they are some of the shoddiest work I've ever seen. And made a lot of these were made in weirdly enough in New York and in Boston, New England, and sent down to Texas and sold in bulk. They didn't think then that Mexicans cared what it looked like. In the time, they were like, yeah, who cares? They're just poor people from there. We don't care. But the stuff that they were making domestically, even from enslaved workers, indentured servants, really detailed work. Yeah, I could go down that rabbit hole all day, but. So, why is it important that we use accurate artifacts?
Why do you want to lie to somebody?
Why do you want to lie to somebody? That's the best answer you could possibly give. I think it tells a more perfect scene. It's all parts and wholes. The more perfect a part is, the more perfect it will be. Visitors will understand the real thing much easier if you show them something closer to the real thing. If you watch, a good example. If you watch John Wayne movies, you think you know what the Indian Wars look like? You might know what it's cool. You might know some of the history behind it, but it doesn't really show you what it looks like. It's hard to mentally picture it. The bad info we have out there, the bad influences that we have that changes our perception, film, fictional movies, fictional books, bad movie history sites. If you guys have, like me, I went to a lot of bad movie history sites as a kid. I still do. I love them. Go to all of them all the time. That changes your perception.
The one thing I learned about is cowboy hats weren't as prevalent as they are in the movies, that they didn't wear cowboy hats. Bowlers, all kinds of.
Oh yeah, who'd have thunk it? It's what, and there's diversity just like today. Different hats in here. I'd say that you guys have the exact same thing. So,
Teaching it said, if you lie to people with your clothing, the public will think you're lying with your interpretation.
yes. I've gotten this a whole heck of a lot. I've seen it happen firsthand. I've heard about it happening from people. People don't take you as an interpreter. I don't mean you. People don't take an interpreter seriously if they see them almost as a caricature or almost as a character that is fiction. If you're not, kind of goes to this point, if you're not respecting what you are interpreting, at least try it, Are people going to take it seriously? Probably not. I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I walk downtown Lawrence, Kansas. Yahoos run around all the time with wacky stuff like, woo, running around. Don't give them the time of day. And so sometimes if you go up to somebody and they're like, hey, do you want to learn about how blacksmithing worked, how farrier work was in the 19th century? That's pretty cool stuff. But if you walk up to somebody and you're like, yeehaw, partner, and you're cowtoning it up, Dodge City style, that may not get the same interest that you want. It might be interest, but what are they going to remember from? What's their take-home message going to be? You, as an interpreter, can learn a lot more from a better replica than a poor one. All the stuff in here that I've made, there are tons of flaws. Like, there's tons of stuff I can pick out between the pants. Those calciners, those buttons are really, really, really not right. This isn't 100% wool. There's a lot of random stuff out there you can pick and choose. I use a glue stick to make that graphic there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter because you're trying to get better as you go. It's all about the journey. But more importantly, it can open up new understandings for you and the interpreter. I've learned in the moment a lot of times I don't over English, but you learn more as you go because of how, look at that fact too close because now I'm mistake. It's probably from sweat, yeah. And I think that using reproductions, the way we interpret the past, it helps to debunk the myth of the primitive past. Make sure I use that Egyptian font. Pretty good. I even Googled rustic wood background. I don't know what it is with the rustic, like prairie vibe everybody's going for, but drives me nuts. So, the myth of the primitive past, I think, is something we talked about this a little bit last week. That people have that perception. We have that perception. Maybe we're not realizing it sometimes. Why do we get so many dumb questions? There's no dumb questions. I don't know if I asked everybody in here about a dumb question at some point in time. Shouldn't people know these a little better? I mean, you have all of the information of the world right here, right at your fingertips. Why don't people know any better? There's a lot of answers to that. Why do people think that it sucked so much back then? Whatever period you're representing, everyone always thinks, aren't you hot in that? Aren't you uncomfortable in that? Isn't this just cramped or dirty? It's stuff. Everything took so much time. We have a different perception. It's all of our modern perspective looking back on different things. So that in there somewhere. And I'm gonna use this as an example. This is something that's just at the site I started working at. None of you don't have this. Don't try to act like you don't have these. Every single site I've ever been to has a Constitution Hall has one. I don't know. You know why? We have actually three of them technically. One's in a case, and it's talking about things people brought to Kansas when they settled. And don't tell my boss about this, but it's kind of BS. I don't think that we should have one of these in there. I don't think a lot of sites should have as many of them laying around. If you're at a site that's a farm, a homestead, something that's functional, that you have the ability to make candles, you can have them. People aren't bringing these to Kansas. You know what they're doing? They're buying candles. If you go to the Steamboat Arabia Museum, there were some of these in there. There's a heck of a lot more candle boxes than these. These are cheap. It's the difference between why don't people eat better? Well, fast food's cheap. It's easy. My brother eats McDonald's every single day. Give him crap every day. Well, it's cheap, it's easy. Why would I make food at home when I live right here by McDonald's? I'm just gonna get food, it's really easy. You can buy cheap candles. Sometimes, if you're representing somebody of a lower class, you might want to show poor products, lower class, cheaper products. This box specifically has a lot of cultural or at least contextual significance. This was a candle box that was bought in Fort Madison, Iowa. Recently found from the stencil. Who it was Enoch George Wilson, a good store right on the shorefront, right on the wharf in Fort Madison. And they got shipped down to St. Louis and then up to Missouri and then up to Kansas before it got to Wisconsin. Three rivers, a lot of towns. Finally made its way to the territorial capital. It was used by Constitutional Conventional President John Calhoun, not the Vice President of the Confederacy, other guy, still racist. But long story short, the context of what it was adds, I think, quite a bit to, what you want to try. I don't want to miss too much because I know we're short on time. Yeah. Whoops. Don't go back. Don't judge a book by its cover. Social classes, economic classes, they're not determined by appearance. People are not locked into those boundaries of class. Everybody dresses differently. Everybody acts differently. Poor people try to live up. Rich people try to dress poor. Things happen. People are all different. Representing rules versus exceptions. Is it okay to have a whole exhibit with 15 exceptions? You only have one example of like 15 things, so you put them all in there. It changes your perception. What does somebody think when they that site? Be mindful of how you are perceived as the interpreter. Katie talked a lot about this yesterday, and I really liked it. Your attitude, the way you come off, helps. It's the atmosphere. It's all part of the atmosphere. You're part of the atmosphere. But every single thing can be an opportunity to understand. Poor doesn't mean empty, doesn't mean dirty. This is an 1865 photo taken in the blacksmith. This is blacksmith employees from the quartermaster department, taken April 1865, right after the surrender. Closer view, we see everything from top hats to work caps. Every single guy has a different everything. Everybody's unique. This is the ambulance shop. Same thing, same day this was taken. Some of the guys are the same guys, you can pick those out, but a lot of these guys are workers with tools, and they're dressed in ways we may not expect people to dress at work. I think that we all just, we all don't want to do this. None of us do this on purpose, but it's good to always keep in the back of your mind and try to not dehumanize people. Keep those barriers, separate. Better artifacts can create better settings. The better parts create a better whole. I could dissect all of these things in here. This is an 1850s, I believe, mounted rifles officer barracks up in Fort Laramie. Great site, if you haven't heard of it before. But what goes into creating these faithful reproductions of artifacts? Does it look like a duck? Does it look like a thing? Does it sound, or excuse me, does it move or operate like a duck? Does it smell, sound, taste like a duck? What actually even is the duck? Do visitors even know what it is? I don't know. A lot of us don't think they do. We have visitors sometimes that are way smarter than we are, or definitely smarter than I am. Do we even know what the duck is? I don't know. Sometimes we don't visit everything, it's the detailed things. In short, what makes a good reproduction artifact? I think there's 3 categories. I'm just going to use clothing as an example. Everything, tinware, lanterns. You have silhouette, does it look like a duck? It's got to look like the era you're representing. I think this is a great view. You can look at this and go, yeah, this is definitely 1840s. This is from the Dolly Madison American Experience documentary, which I think her name was Candace Donald, the costumer. She has a really good video on costume design. I was going to play if we have time at the end. It's for film, but I think it's really relevant to museum work. Materials. Does wool have to be super thick and bulky? It can be really thin, it can be tropical weight. Depends on what you're making. You want to make it appropriate to what you're representing. And construction. Sometimes we get caught up in that, especially reenactors get really caught up in that. They don't really have to be, but it has to be faithful to what you're representing. And one of the best ways you can learn about what you're trying to make or represent is by looking at the real thing. Go look at the real thing. Go get your hands on it. There's sources out there. There's ways to see it. In a perfect world, if you could make an exact one-to-one copy of something and use it, learn what that exact thing was like to use. That's not common. That is not common. I wish everybody could have everything that's like that. But just can't. You have to think about the realm of possible. What all is out there that could have been possible. This is an 1860s era. This is an 1860s Whitlow. They're cool. I would love a reproduction one. They don't make it like this, at least that I've found, that are affordable. We see a lot of these at historic sites. They're similar, but if you can't find a reproduction of something that's good enough or passable, maybe change gears. I give that a thumbs up. This is a different 1860s lantern. It's a candle lantern. Candles are easy to get. Candles are pretty easy to get. It's from the Bertrand 1865 shipwreck. This is an exact copy. It's way cheaper, way easier to get, way easier to upkeep. I give this a thumbs up. Also, I was really excited for that. You get a whole cat. When you type in thumbs up, that's the first picture that comes up. Practice makes perfect. Keep trying, keep doing the thing. Match something, make the best you can evolve. Don't get lost in the sauce. Some people are all worried about details, and sometimes volunteers can be too uptight. Sometimes reenactors can be really uptight about it. Can be really uptight about stuff. But it doesn't matter sometimes, because as long as you're aware of what you're doing, aware of what you're interpreting, you don't really have to worry about that too much. Just make sure it doesn't affect your interpretive message, how the visitor's experience can be. Anything you can add that betters that, I say go for it. Anything beyond that, who cares? Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care that my undershirt has a silk print and a muslin back on the placket. Nobody's going to see it. Even if it's laying on your bed, nobody's going to see it. But I'm going to finish with this. Don't be afraid to not be perfect. I used the Farby Barbie reference. In the reenacting world, I even downloaded a special Barbie font. For this. In the reenacting world, we use the term Barbie, as in far be it from realistic, far be it from accurate. And that gets thrown around a lot. I know we probably all have volunteers at sites that come into special programs. Actors, they may not be what we hope that they could be. But that's really, it's our job to help. Because we are all here to create interest, to provoke people to think. I put this on here. This is a cartoon making fun of Farby reenactors pretty much in favor of the reenactor. Doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, this guy might be way more passionate than this guy. He may spend way more time reading, researching, and interpreting the people than this guy ever would. There's no finish line. Freeman Tilden's ghost doesn't come down and go, "You did it, you found out everything about practice." That doesn't happen. You just keep learning and then you die. That's it. And so you start somewhere and you always have to just keep moving forward. We are all cultivating understanding. That is our job. We are boots on the ground, cultivating understanding, which is the only way to create appreciation, and that is how history incites receive reaction. Don't put somebody down. If you see somebody doing something you think is wrong or incorrect, call them up. Tell them something. Get them interested in the things that you're interested in. You start somewhere, whether it's really accurate stuff or not. This is Jackson's Mill. That's me, my little brother. That's me. Second grade. You start somewhere, and you never know who's watching, whether you're talking to somebody or not. It's all interpretation. It's all the atmosphere. And at the end of the day, you just have to. I think that is the best detail I can put on it. And I'll close with this. Tilden, at the end of Interpreting Our Heritage, he talks about if there was one principle of interpretation, it is love. I don't think that you can find the details. We're all people, we're all different, but you can love something down to the thing. And that, I think, is your passion. Thank you all for sitting in and listening.
So please fill these out, and envelope is at the back. You can just slip it in. Please keep it flat if you can, because they're reaching through on that. Thank you.
First historical experience of great school. I love Fort Worth. I'm going back out there and they pulled it there. I was there. We were presenting the folks who was building the parents. Yeah. And I'm 13 years old. Easy to find. I'm gonna just sit down and work on track. So repairs and work out. Because here I'm library then.
I want something to take her.
I'm gonna start.
Super nice. Actually, you're well, Stanley, your police work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Big man.
That's some good stuff too. That's what Nick Haley used to get.
Fabric is just the biggest impediment to costume.
I wish I could.
Period shirts, early, late 18th, or 19th century linen shirts, just not there.
The closest
And you feel the original stuff in
The closest I've found is Soviet era, Soviet government. That's like as close as I can get. And clearly those would be anymore, so.
I found some stuff at the Pennsylvania Big Outdoor Antique Mall Market stuff, British Olympian stuff coming over. Some of the big toweling, so it's big enough for States.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I
But
dream.
it's a one-shot deal.
I dream of finding.
That was 20 years ago too. Yeah.
I dream of finding Joe Linden somewhere in New York. But I know, you know, that's.
I know a guy that can meet you out of.
Oh, I got.
I've worked with
Some of these emails, and I watch, I think emails, and I'll not sit and if I can help in any way, other than. I'm sure that's not that thing. You're close. Yeah, I want to, but. Thinking.
Like.
The
Yeah, the nightmare.
yeah. Yeah, I like